The U.S. Federal Reserve is releasing their new instant payments system, FedNow, in July of this year. People are claiming this will change the U.S. dollar forever, and some are worried that it may lead to a central bank digital currency in this here land of the free. Let's get into it, guys.
Warning, the following program contains critical thinking, honest opinions, viewpoints on culture that may seem conservative, and a positive view on absolute detestable things such as marriage and children. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome back to Subtle Rampage Podcast, where I go on subtle rampages about the things that I am passionate about. Sometimes those things are cultural, sometimes they're political. It really just depends on what I'm interested in at the time. But today I would like to talk about money, okay? I would like to talk about moolah. Specifically the digital kind, because the U.S. Federal Reserve has officially announced that in July of this year, they're going to be releasing their FedNow instant payments services. As far as I understand, this is pretty much a similar situation to the private sector Zelle, for those of you who have that attached to your bank account, where you can instantly transfer money to another one of your bank accounts or to somebody else's bank account, and it's like there immediately. You do not have to wait an hour, you don't have to wait a few days, it's just there, and there's no fee because it's just a service that your bank is paying for. Anyways, the reason that I became aware of this is not because I'm a super smart individual who keeps up with every single announcement that the federal government makes, because there's a lot of departments and branches of the federal government. It's just a lot going on there, so I can't possibly keep track of all of their stupid decisions. But I did see a lot of short form videos across various platforms, and then a few longer YouTube videos that kind of went a little viral in some circles, having to do with this whole FedNow system and central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, and pretty much being like, as of July 2023, the US dollar will no longer exist. And it's like, oh my god, okay, calm down. Or it would be like, as of July 2023, the US will be China 2.0, and it'd be like, oh my god, okay, calm down. So I don't think it's that serious yet, you guys, but this type of thing does kind of look like some sort of stepping stone. I don't pretend to be an expert in this field. Gonna be honest, a lot of what I read in preparation for this episode confused the crap out of me. I had to read it a few times to get certain things, but it's fine. It's fine. It's totally fine. Okay, some things are not for everybody. But here's the deal pretty much. I Googled so you don't have to. Okay, I have a bunch of information I'm going to share with you. I'm going to give my opinion, but I'm going to preface my opinion by saying it could be flawed due to lack of understanding certain aspects of this type of stuff. Because, I don't understand everything having to do with digital payments. There was this one paper that I read on, what was it called? I have it over here. Let's look at the title. Oh, I read this paper that the Federal Reserve has out on their website. You can look it up if you want, so you can see what I'm talking about, but it's titled "What is Programmable Money?" by Alexander Lee. And I tried to read this. I tried so hard. I probably made it 2/3 of the way through it, but I genuinely did not understand most of it. So, we all have our strengths and we all have our interests. So, if you're pretty far ahead of me on this subject, then you might think that this is the least informative episode of anything you've ever watched ever. But if you're just a normal human being, okay, if you're a layman, okay, and you need things in layman's terms, I will do my best to give that to you today. So let's get into it. About the FedNow service. According to the Federal Reserve, the FedNow service is a new instant payment infrastructure developed by the Federal Reserve that allows financial institutions of every size across the U.S. to provide safe and efficient instant payment services. The service will be deployed in phases, with the initial launch taking place in July of 2023. Now, what I thought was interesting and what I want y'all to kind of take notes on, because it's going to be kind of scrambled. I might mention one thing here, one thing there, but they give us reasons, okay, as to why they have come up with this FedNow service and why it's important for them to do it, as the Federal Reserve. And one of those reasons that they give on their website is that, besides the speed and convenience of these instant payments can yield real economic benefits for individuals and businesses by allowing them to make time-sensitive payments whenever needed and providing them with more flexibility to manage their money. And then they go a step further, and they're pretty much like, guys, we are going to help the low-income people. We're going to help the lower middle-class people, okay? Those people living paycheck to paycheck, those people with tight wallets, this is for them. Okay, this is like, honestly, okay, we've spent years on this FedNow service. It's literally like a charity. It's an act of love. It's a labor of love for these people living paycheck to paycheck, because they say this flexibility is especially important for individuals and households on tight budgets, for whom receiving a payment in real time could help avoid the need to use expensive check cashing services, engage in high-cost borrowing, or incur overdraft or late fees that may throw off their carefully managed finances. Don't get me wrong, okay? Yeah, that might be a plus. That might be a little thing that helps in certain situations and whatever. I just think it's funny that they give like such a minor like circumstance. Like, I know it's not minor in the moment, like, but it's just such a weird reason to give for such a big service that they're going to be offering to everybody across the country. But moving on, okay, we have this little statement also by the Federal Reserve, where they say that the Federal Reserve Board considers input from public historical experience and its own analysis to assess whether such services can be expected to generate public benefits that private sector services alone may be unable to achieve. Based on its assessment for the FedNow service, the board concluded that private sector real-time gross settlement services for instant payments alone were unlikely to provide an infrastructure for instant payments with reasonable effectiveness, scope, and equity. Now, guys, I don't know about you, but if there's one thing I'm looking for in my instant payment services, okay, it's equity. Equity and inclusion, my guy. But anyways, okay, my question when it comes to this, okay, is I feel like it's not like Wi-Fi. You know how with Wi-Fi, like, they have all these, like, states have certain initiatives, especially more rural states have these, like, goals and 2-year plans and 3-year plans on how to make sure that everybody across the entire state has access to good Wi-Fi, which is interesting. But it's like a thing that the state governments and people actually have to consider and make plans to make sure that infrastructure exists so that people have access to Wi-Fi. In our modern world today, Wi-Fi is kind of important for most people. There are plenty of people who don't need it, who don't use it, but a lot of people do have to use it on a daily basis. So, I can see how that might be like a situation where the government might step in and be like, look, okay, we either have to be in charge of what the private sector is doing, or we have to step in and offer services that the private sector is not able to handle because there's just so much demand for it. But like, this is like just instant payment services. I would like to know if any of you out there who don't have something like Zelle like attached to your banking account, like if you don't currently have access to instant payment services, like, do you feel a sense of injustice? Do you feel a sense of inequity? Are you even like concerned about this in your life? Like, do you care? Like, yeah, it might be like, oh, well, that might be nice, I guess. Like, I might need it at some point. It might be important at some point. But it's like, Is that something that people are? Is it something that people are asking for? I don't, I don't think it is. I don't think anybody feels a sense of inequity because they don't have the ability to instantly deposit money into a different bank account or receive money into their bank account like right away. I feel like we've not had that very long in general, like most people. So I feel like people are getting along just fine without it. That's just what I think, but whatever. Let's see what else we got here. Also at launch, okay, the FedNow service will support only domestic payments between U.S. depository institutions. Okay, so you cannot be instant paymenting people in other countries, and they cannot instant payment you. So, okay? What are you gonna do? Cry? You gonna cry? No? Okay, good. I don't like making people cry. Anyways, let's talk about whether or not FedNow is replacing cash. Okay, is FedNow a central digital bank currency? Well, according to the Federal Reserve, it is not. And according to the definition of what an instant payment service is, it's not a CBDC. But also, the Federal Reserve goes on to say that they have not made a decision on issuing a central bank digital currency and would only proceed with the issuance of a CBDC with an authorizing law. Testifying before the House Financial Services Committee in March 2023, Chair Powell said a central bank digital currency is something we would certainly need congressional approval for. They say that. I don't know if that's the only circumstance under which they would actually, start pursuing a CBDC, but yeah, that's the Federal Reserve's statement on that. Now, what is a CBDC? What countries have a CBDC? Your first thought, I'm sure, is China. Okay, and you would be correct, but let's dive into it a little bit more. Okay, so a CBDC is a digital form of central bank money that is widely available to the general public. Now, central banks, it's like the Federal Reserve. A lot of countries have a central bank. It just makes sense. Where does the money come from? It has to come from somewhere. So a central bank typically controls the physical money. A CBDC is the same thing, just with a digital form of that money that doesn't exist in the US at the moment. We don't have a digital currency separate from the US dollar. Like, that's not a thing. Central bank money refers to money that is a liability of the central bank. In the United States, there are currently two types of central bank money: physical currency issued by the Federal Reserve and digital balances held by commercial banks at the Federal Reserve. A CBDC would differ from that existing digital money available to the general public because a CBDC would be a liability of the Federal Reserve, not of a commercial bank. So it would be government run. That is the difference. It would be government controlled. Will a US CBDC replace cash or paper currency? The Federal Reserve says they are committed to ensuring the continued safety and availability of cash and is considering a CBDC as a means to expand safe payment options, not to reduce or replace them. Never. Why would they ever do that? Who knows? Who knows, guys? I have no idea. Do you have an idea? All right. Oh, here's the potential benefits. According to the Federal Reserve, these are the potential benefits of a CBDC. It could potentially offer a range of benefits. For example, it could provide households and businesses a convenient electronic form of central bank money with the safety and liquidity that would entail, give entrepreneurs a platform on which to create new financial products and services, support faster and cheaper payments, including cross-border payments, and expand consumer access to the financial system. And my initial thought reading this part was just like, well, since they're going to launch FedNow at first and say that it's only for domestic payments, my question is, are they going to use that as sort of a premise for like soft launching a CBDC? Like, are they going to be like, well, FedNow is just for domestic use. If we want to do this sort of thing like internationally, let's just make a little CBDC over here. Let's just make a little one, a small, little tiny one, a little tiny one. It's not going to do anything to you, a little tiny one. Again, I don't know how this works. That was just a thought that popped into my head because I have a brain, so I have thoughts. So yeah. Now then, if you ask the Federal Reserve what are the risks of a CBDC, they say it could pose certain risks and raise a variety of important policy questions, including how it might affect financial sector market structure, the cost and availability of credit, the safety and stability of the financial system, and the efficacy of monetary policy. Now, okay, you just heard me read what they list as the benefits, and you heard me read what they list as the risks of a CBDC in the United States. It kind of sounds like the risks outweigh the benefits here. To me, personally. And I would think to most other rational human beings. That's what it sounds like to me. So, as soon as you see the fact that the risks outweigh the benefits, wouldn't you go, okay, well, maybe we shouldn't do that? I don't know. That's just a question that I felt like asking. Let's see. Financial institutions in the United States are subject to robust rules that are designed to combat money laundering and the financing of terrorism. So when asked if a CBDC would still protect consumer privacy, the Federal Reserve says that a CBDC intermediary would need to verify the identity of a person accessing CBDC, just as banks and other financial institutions currently verify the identities of their customers. So it's like, oh, okay, that doesn't sound like a big deal. Banks already make sure that I am who I am before I use my money or before I cash a check or whatever. Unless you live in a small rural town, then the bank already knows you and they don't check your ID. But pretty much like it's like, oh, banks already do that. Why the government can do that? That's fine. It's like they probably already do that anyways. I mean, there's like probably an FBI agent looking through my computer monitor right now at me, and my iPhone probably takes a picture of me every 5 seconds when it's looking through my front camera. Like we're very used to, at least people my age, I feel like, are very used to the idea that like nothing is really private, especially with all this technology that we have around us. But I think the difference here between a CBDC intermediary, okay, for the federal government and the, financial institution or your local bank verifying your identity, it's like the difference between the government deciding what information of yours is private versus somebody in the private sector who's devoted to your privacy, whose literal existence depends on them keeping your information private. Like, it's a difference between those two entities deciding what to do with your information. Okay, because if the private sector bank loses your information, or your information is stolen, or your money is stolen, okay, they're responsible for that. And if they screw up on a big enough level, then they're like, nobody's going to want to bank there. They're going to be screwed. They're going to be done with. That's how the private sector works. If you aren't good at what you do and you screw up bad enough, bye-bye. There's somebody else waiting to take your place. And with a CBDC, that's the federal government sitting there going, oh, that's your private information. And if they do something with your private information, one, you probably won't really know anything about it. And two, it's like, who holds the government responsible? Well, it's supposed to be the people, but I don't really know if the US people are really in a place to be holding the government responsible at the moment. We don't get along very much. So, that's intentional, by the way. But yeah, guys. So that's just my little thought on that. Oh, this I thought was interesting. Okay. In response to the question, what are the Federal Reserve's ongoing technological initiatives related to CBDC? Okay, the Federal Reserve is engaged in a number of experiments related to digital currencies, including a hypothetical CBDC. Oh joy. Oh, that's great. You mean there's like a simulation of a CBDC that you're like messing around with? That's great. Okay. Examples include a multi-year exploratory research project, Project Hamilton, conducted by the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston in collaboration with MIT's Digital Currency Initiative to investigate the technical feasibility of a general purpose CBDC that could be used by an economy the size of the United States. There's also an innovation center at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York to facilitate collaboration with the bank for international settlements on a number of financial innovations, and a technology lab at the Board of Governors that has several CBDC experiments underway. Ain't that information that you wanted to have? I like finding out things about the government because it really makes me sleep well at night. It makes me feel very comforted. It makes me feel just very safe in my home and in my country. It really does. So props to the government. Props to all these people who felt like we needed to experiment with CBDCs. Because I'm sure, that's all going to go really well for everybody in the future and not just certain elite people. But let's talk about some of the other countries that are attempting or thinking about this whole CBDC thing, okay? So, according to the Atlantic Council, as of March 1st, 65 countries are in the advanced stage of development, and over 20 central banks have launched their pilot programs, including Brazil, Japan, and Russia. And if you want to go check out the Atlantic Council's website, they're like a parent keeping track of all their little CBDC babies, okay? According to them, they track and update developments of CBDCs in 119 countries that represent more than 95% of the world's gross domestic product. So you can go check that out for yourself if you're extremely interested in this topic. But here's some of their country updates, okay? So in Australia, Commonwealth Bank and the Australia and New Zealand Banking Group have joined the Reserve Bank of Australia's pilot program to explore the use of a CBDC, okay? And they're going to work alongside 12 other financial institutions and payment companies to test that CBDC. In Brazil, after conducting a closed pilot program with financial institutions in 2023, the Central Bank of Brazil President Roberto Campos Neto. Okay, I know that's not pronounced correctly. I don't really care. I don't know the guy. But this guy says he aims to launch a CBDC in 2024. That's in less than a year. Okay, guys? In Canada, okay, in 2023, the Bank of Canada released an analytical note highlighting the importance of offline payment functionality in CBDCs. In China, in January 2023, they included an electronic version of their money in their currency circulation calculations. And this electronic version of their money represented 0.13% of cash and reserves held by the central bank. In India in 2023, India's largest retail chain, Reliance Retail, will start accepting payments in digital rupee in stores during its pilot stage. In March, India began testing an offline functionality for its CBDC. In Japan, after completing their proof of concept, the Bank of Japan will begin a pilot program in April to test the technical feasibility of digital yen. So according to this, they started doing this in April. Okay. Japan will also establish a CBDC forum, inviting private businesses engaging in retail payments or related technologies to participate in the discussion. Based on the results, the bank will decide whether to launch a digital currency by the year 2026. And then, there's a ton of other countries on here, like Russia. Bank of Russia is preparing to roll out the first consumer pilot for the digital ruble on April 1st, 2023, so they've pretty much already done that. The United Kingdom, in February 2023, the Bank of England and HM Treasury released a consultation paper outlining the case for a digital pound. The paper concluded that it is too early to decide whether to introduce the digital pound, but that preparation towards that decision is ongoing. Now, my thing here is like, I don't understand the point of all this, really. I think most people are perfectly fine with cash. I think most people are perfectly fine with the cards that they have now. If anything, I more so hear people say that like that they're paranoid about like the little like touchless payment on the cards, okay, or they're paranoid about the chips in their cards, or I think that bothers people more than cash does. And then we're gonna start this whole electronic payment service. I don't know, just seems unnecessary to me. I think that our world functions kind of okay with the current payment system, but whatever. Now this is something that I thought was interesting. Okay, there's wholesale CBDC and then there is retail CBDC. Okay, so wholesale CBDC is used by financial institutions for bank-to-bank transactions and settlements. For example, wholesale CBDCs have been used to facilitate efficient cross-border payments among international financial institutions. And then a retail CBDC is more straightforward. This type of CBDC is available to the general public for all transactions relating to the purchase of goods and services. It can be used in the same way as cash, but it's digital. Some countries have chosen to implement both wholesale and retail CBDCs, and some of those countries are Australia, China, and India. So, there's that information for you. But I just kind of find it interesting how nonchalantly the United States is going about this, okay? Because, granted, the Federal Reserve has spent several years kind of doing studies and facilitating research and trying to figure out if we're even going to do a CBDC and whatever. But it's like, if you're putting all this work into it, you obviously want to do a CBDC. I think the question is just, how much information on it do you have to get the people in charge to sign off on it? Pretty much. How can you spin it in a way that looks so great that none of the people are going to vote against it? That, whatever. But the reason that I personally find this stuff concerning is not because, oh my gosh, FedNow is the end of the world. Okay, the reason that I personally find this stuff concerning is because if you were keeping up with things going on in state legislative sessions this year, there were a bunch of bills that were pretty much laying the groundwork for a CBDC. And that's where my concern comes in. Some of them passed, some of them got pushed to next year, just depends on the state. But it's kind of one of those things where it's like, why are we not talking about this more? Why are we not hearing about it? I know that in South Dakota, there was a bill, okay, that got vetoed by Governor Noem, and that was in the news a bit. People will talk about it a little bit. But we had pretty much the exact same bill here in Tennessee, and nobody in Tennessee was really talking about it. I mean, there was definitely a few people from certain organizations that, mentioned it and brought it up and were like, hey guys, this is kind of a big deal. But, it's not like legislators were coming out going, guys, look at this, we need to kill this bill, like they were in South Dakota. Like, I saw several videos of representatives up there being like, it's our goal, we need to get this bill off it's obviously going to be voted on the floor. So we reached out to Governor Noem. We got her to veto it. Like, they were actually taking action up there. And then down here, we have our, Republicans just kind of sitting there going, interesting. Okay, so that's gonna lay the groundwork for digital currency. Oh, it's gonna lay the groundwork for possibly a global currency in the New World Order. Oh, okay. Yeah, my constituents don't want that, but, I'm just not going to say anything to them, so go ahead and do it. It's fine. That's pretty much, the attitude, because, our legislators, they like to do things for no reason or for their own reasons when what they're supposed to be doing is representing their constituents. That's why I particularly like when I see a representative on one side of the aisle who knows that he or she has constituents on both sides of the aisle actually going, hey, well, let me ask questions in committee so that I fully understand the situation, because I've got my constituents on the other side of the aisle from me pointing this stuff out, and so I'm kind of curious as to, what's going on, because if I've got a lot of my constituents wanting a certain thing that I wasn't going to automatically vote for, I want to understand it and maybe vote the way that they want me to vote. That's what I appreciate seeing that, okay? When a Democrat can vote for Republican legislation just because he knows that a lot of his constituents are asking for it, and that maybe some of his Democrat constituents don't care, I think that's cool, because that's your job is to represent your constituents. Your job is not to just represent yourself or represent your own financial interests or your own campaign interests or the interests of the person who promised they would vote for your bill if you voted for theirs. But I digress. Okay, let's talk about the comparison of the South Dakota bill and the Tennessee bill that I said were pretty much the same. Now, I went and personally watched Gary Humble with Tennessee Stand's video on this because he kind of just grabbed a bunch of the legislation that was of concern regarding this stuff and just put it all together so that everybody could, like, you know, go look at it for themselves. But anyways, so the language in both bills is pretty similar, if not exactly the same. This bill was pushed in a lot of states besides just Tennessee and South Dakota. But yeah, the main thing that I saw people noting of concern in this bill was its definition of money. Okay, so this bill defines money as having the meaning that we all know money to have. Okay, it's a currency. It's used for buying and selling and trading and, like, you know, whatever. Okay, but this clarifies that money in an electronic form that cannot be subjected to control of the federal government is not included in the definition of money. So money in an electronic form that is not controlled by the federal government is not money, according to this bill. And so people seem to have a real problem with that. The governor of South Dakota, Governor Noem, she vetoed the bill in their state. The legislature voted to override her veto, and that motion failed, so the bill did not pass in their state. The bill did not pass in Tennessee either. It didn't even really get voted on. It just kind of stalled out. But anyways, this is what Governor Noem had to say when she did veto the legislation. Dear Mr. Speaker and members of the House, I respectfully return to you House Bill 1193 with my veto. House Bill 1193 is an act to amend provisions of the Uniform Commercial Code, known as the UCC. HB 1193 adopts a definition of money to specifically exclude cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, as well as other digital assets. At the same time, these UCC revisions include central bank digital currencies as money. These developments concern me for several reasons. First, by expressly excluding cryptocurrencies as money, it would become more difficult to use cryptocurrency. By needlessly limiting this freedom, HB 1193 would put South Dakota citizens at a business disadvantage. Second, by defining money in this proposed way, HB 1193 opens the door to the risk that the federal government could more easily adopt a CBDC, which then may become the only viable digital currency. At this moment in time, such a government-backed electronic currency has not been created. It would be imprudent to create regulations governing something that does not yet exist. More importantly, South Dakota should not open the door to a potential future overreach by the federal government. So, yeah, I feel like that pretty much explains it. That explains people's issue with it. It's, you know, I mean, whether or not you care about cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin and stuff like that, it is pretty much defining money in a way that says digital money is not money unless it is controlled by the federal government. And it's kind of like, really? That sounds a little fishy, a little scary, and you're saying you're not considering a CBDC? You don't know if you're going to do a CBDC? Okay, then why are we laying the groundwork for a CBDC? That would be my question. Okay. And now for a bill that did pass in Tennessee. Okay. Let's look at Senate Bill number 268. Was signed into law by Governor Lee on April 4th, I believe, and this is known as the Money Transmission Modernization Act. Again, the problem with this that a lot of people have is its definition of money. So on page 5 of the legislation, number 5, number 19 on page 5. I don't remember what section it is. Anyways, it defines money as a medium of exchange that is authorized or adopted by the United States or issued by a foreign government. Makes sense, right? Okay, that's like kind of what we traditionally understand as money, right? You know, we have the US dollar, Mexico has the peso, the UK has the pound. Like, we all these countries have their government issued like medium of exchange as this bill defines it. Okay, but then it includes a second definition for the word money. Okay, money includes a monetary unit of account established by an intergovernmental organization or by agreement between two or more governments. And this is where people are pretty much saying, that sounds like New World Order. That sounds like a global currency. And, you could argue that it's not because it doesn't say it is, but it's kind of like, you kind of got to ask the question of why is this definition included then? Like, what is the other reasoning for this definition if it's not to kind of lay groundwork for a future global currency? If you have an answer, I'd love to hear it. Like I said, I'm not well versed in this. I mean, there could be answers to all the questions I'm asking. So, give them to me. But yeah, that's just whatever. I don't understand the point of these definitions of money if it's not to lay the groundwork for global currency, if it's not to lay the groundwork for a CBDC. It just doesn't make sense for me for these definitions to be included. I think the one attitude towards this stuff that I don't really understand is people who are all like, oh, well, why does it matter if they're putting this in legislation? Why does it matter if they're putting things into law if the thing that they're legislating doesn't exist? It doesn't affect anything. So why does it matter? And it's like, that's why it matters. Is because it's why are they legislating something that does not even exist yet, supposedly. It's kind of like how, they expect us to believe that, like, they didn't have green screen technology until it was available to the public, or they didn't have deepfake technology until it was available to the public, and that those technologies were released to the public at the same, like, upgraded level that they have access to. Right. Okay. Got it. I'm like, why? You cannot be nonchalant about stuff like this. It's like, it literally is illogical. Why are you legislating something that doesn't exist? Well, the answer is it either already exists, it's either already on the road to existence, or that's your answer. Okay. It's either going to exist and that's why they're legislating it, or it already exists and they just haven't told you about it yet. Like, those are your answers, man. Sorry. Again, it's just progress in the name of progress. It's like the AI stuff, okay? There's a lot of people going, why are we even doing this? And, regardless of what the real reasons are, okay, the government or the elite people, I'm sure they have real reasons for wanting a global currency, for wanting AI to be extremely advanced. Like, they have their reasons for that. But they're not giving us the real reasons. Okay, so if we are going to go based off of the reasons that they give us, okay, it is literally just progress in the name of progress. Like, there is not a point to continuing to develop AI. Okay, there's not a real point that has more benefits than it does risks. Okay, it's pointless. It's just progress in the name of progress. And the same thing goes for this digital currency stuff. The same thing goes for this global currency stuff. It's like, it's just progress in the name of progress, because, they're not giving us the honest reason as to why they want to do any of this. So if we are to believe the reasons that they're giving us for doing what they're doing, then it literally makes no sense. There is no reason to keep progressing in this stuff, if you ask me. But yeah, I guess the last thing I want to talk about is just kind of like, what even are we supposed to do with this information, right? So, no, the United States does not have a central bank digital currency yet. No, we don't have a global currency yet. No, FedNow, okay, is not going to be the end of the US dollar yet. But it's like, what do you do with the information that this stuff pretty much does lay the groundwork for those things to happen in the future? It's like, it's like the question of, like, what would you do, like, if you were actually told 2 years, 5 years in advance about the COVID stuff? Okay, like, what would you do to prepare? It'd probably be extremely overwhelming. And if you're not in a good place financially, like, what are you even supposed to do to prepare? Like, My best friend and I, we talk about this on a pretty regular basis, like, because, we'll send each other the short form content videos we see on the CBDC stuff because, you see it or whatever and it gets you all paranoid and thinking and stressed and whatever about the future. But it's kind of hard not to get worried or paranoid or whatever because like even as a Christian, okay, because you can sit here and you can trust God to take care of you and you trust things will work out the way that they're supposed to and you trust that things will work the way that God wills them to work out. But at the same time, it's like you look back at history and there's been some pretty terrible situations. Like, us in America, we'll sit here and go all day long, oh, there's no realm in which the government would come knocking on doors and taking our kids away from us because we didn't get vaccinated. Are you sure? Oh, there's no realm in which they start persecuting Christians in the Western world. Are you sure? Like, you don't know these things. Okay? Crazier things have happened. Okay? And people are very easy to control if you do it right. I mean, hello. If we're to go with what happened in Germany in World War II with the Nazis and Hitler and whatever, okay, that was insane, right? Okay, people were getting taken to concentration camps. People's children were being killed. People's parents were being killed. Like, people were being ripped away from their families, ripped out of their homes, like, and they had to wear these stars. Like, it's like dystopian, right? Okay, but it didn't happen in our lifetime, so oh well. And it's like this just figment of our history imagination, I guess. I'm just like, just because that didn't happen specifically in the US, you don't think that like things will happen in the US? I'm like, we're not as strong of a country as we might have been in the past, or maybe we never were as strong of a country as we thought we were, but I'm just kind of looking at it like this, we can't view ourselves, we can't view our country as invincible, because look what happened to the Titanic when people said they were invincible. Okay, people were like, even God himself couldn't sink the ship, and you know what? The stupid ship sunk. Okay, in a very terrifying manner. All right. So quit thinking you're invincible and consider the fact that some pretty terrible crap could happen to you, could happen to your family. Are you supposed to be constantly worried and paranoid about that? No. It's just, I think we forget that the terrible things can happen even in a very developed Western country such as the United States of America. And so to pretend that the government has our best interest at heart and to pretend that they would never take away our kids for something trivial and to pretend that, religion can never be discriminated against in the United States of America ever again. Yeah, right. Okay. Like, to pretend that certain features of dystopian stories could not happen because this is the US. Okay. To pretend that something that happens in China on a daily basis could never happen in the US if we let it. Like, okay. Like, if the people allow the US government to take our guns, then the Second Amendment is, done away with and the US people don't have guns and whatever, right? If the US people allowed it. We have not allowed it yet, thankfully, but it's like, it's one of those things where, like, if we allow certain things to happen, they could very well happen. And sometimes you don't have to allow things to happen, okay? Sometimes the government is powerful enough or another country is powerful enough to just take over your entire life, and there's a war or there's discrimination or there's whatever, and, yeah. So there's lots of scary things. That's my point. And, me and my best friend will discuss things like that or discuss like CBDC. And it's like, it's a little scary, especially, as younger people. It's not like we've had, 20 years to explore the financial realm, okay, and get our stuff in order, right? So it's not like we have all these assets or like we can just take our money out of the bank and put it into physical things that are going to hold up in an economy that's strictly operating off of digital currency and say we didn't want to be part of that. Okay, there's no way that we could really do that because we're not in the financial position to yet, right? So you kind of start questioning like what do you do? Like, do you pull all your money out of the banks? Well, I mean, does it matter if you only have $1,000 in there? Or does pulling all your money out of the banks really only matter for the people who have like thousands upon thousands, maybe $1 million, right? That's the type of question that kind of runs through my brain. Like, what about the people that are not financially set up for maintaining physical assets? I mean, what do you do? If you know, please tell me. It's like if you were to prepare for the COVID-19 stuff a few years in advance, okay? Like, if you had the financial resources to be able to prepare in advance, okay, maybe you would do that. But if you didn't, then it's just kind of like, oh, well, I know this thing is coming. What do I do? Like, there's nothing I can do. Oh well. Like, that's kind of how it feels. It's like, we know that at some point they're going to attempt a CBDC. We know that at some point they're going to attempt a global currency. The question is like, when and what do we even do about it? What do we even do? I mean, there's been bills put up in U.S. Congress, I think like 2 years in a row at least, maybe 3. And they've only made it as far as being introduced, and then they just kind of stay like that for the entire rest of the session. Nothing else is done with them. But there have been bills introduced by some legislators that say the U.S. can never have a CBDC, or the U.S. can never have a CBDC associated with China, or the U.S. can never, like, whatever. So there's been bills like that brought forward. They've never made it past introduction, which is a little questionable, Yeah, So, I guess that's about it. No, FedNow is not a central digital bank currency all by itself, but I still find it concerning. It is just paving the way for a CBDC in the future, because regardless of anything else, I mean, even if you're like not concerned about a CBDC at all, and you're not concerned about FedNow, and you're not concerned about any of this, right? I do think you should be concerned about the fact that the federal government is inserting themselves into yet another aspect of what will eventually be our daily lives. Okay, FedNow might not catch on right away, or it might not be used by everybody right away, but give it a year or two. Give it a year or two, guys. Anyways, hopefully y'all enjoyed this episode. If you have an opinion on the subject, or you have more information for me to read up on, please leave a comment in the YouTube comment section. Anyways, yeah, that's about it. Those are my thoughts. See you later.